So here we are. This is cholesterol. I'm going to give you a little bit of a foreshadow with this one slide that we're going to talk molecules. So if you haven't dosed with a little brain power, you might need that for this talk, or you might need to watch it a couple times, because I really do think the message is important. And I took extra special time trying to write the chapter on this that I didn't get too doctory, but I didn't miss the point. All right, so we're going to start by unpacking cholesterol in a way that I want you to pay attention to a few things. So the word cholesterol, it means some things, and in general, it means that there are some molecules throughout the human body that are delivering fat to the resources, to the muscles, to your eyes, to your tongue, to your heart, to your lungs. Your cells need energy. And the best way to deliver energy is fat. So the deliverance of fat comes from these molecules. You'll see those little structures up top. I am going to go through those a little bit better. You'll see that this is a close-up of the biggest and fluffiest of the carriers for cholesterol, the carriers for fat. And you can see some funky structures in there. We're going to unpack those a little bit more. The little red kind of triangles, but they're not quite full triangles, so I think those are rhomboid structures with the 3 strings of yellow. Are those 3 strings of fat are what that's supposed to represent. That red is actually a couple of glucose molecules that holds it together, but the whole unit is called a triglyceride. So if you remember back to our patient, we measure those in your cholesterol test. We look for triglycerides. So triglycerides look like that red with 3 tails. The next one is actually the cholesterol molecule. So those look like, they kind of look like sperm in our in our drawing, but a nice big yellow globule with one string of fat. The key there is cholesterol actually is the molecule that turns into vitamin D, testosterone, estrogen. That process of taking a unit of fatty energy and actually morphing it into, you'll hear me often talk about fat-based hormones. That fat-based hormone comes from this yellow cholesterol unit, and the way it gets around your body is through these carrying units, and we're gonna name them, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about them. But the last part of the structure of each one of these carrying units is called a phospholipid. The phospholipid has a blue dot on the outside and then some strings that go inward. The blue area actually represents the water-soluble part of this molecule. So we're going to start with the biggest molecule called a chylomicron. You're going to see that the tag, the ribbon that kind of laces around the outside is called ApoB48. You don't have to remember that, but just know that it's going to be different from some of the other ones. It's how the body recognizes what is inside those blue molecules. And that ApoB48 is it's our fluffy molecule carrying fat around. In fact, in medical school, they give you a couple of history lessons about when we used to predict major problems with heart disease. We would have the patient's blood just drawn, put it in a test tube, and see if you could see the fat droplets on top of the blood after it settled for a while. And what you were really looking at were major chylomicrons. And if you couldn't process triglycerides right, these chylomicrons would float to the top, and you could just see that it was kind of like the cream on top of milk. The fat would rise to the top, and you'd have all this fat layer, and they had a high risk of heart disease. Again, so we're going to look at chylomicrons and know that inside the chylomicron, 84% of those molecules are triglycerides. So when you look what fat is in there, you'll see 84%. If you think back to our patient though, you don't hear about chylomicrons in a cholesterol test. She got her cholesterol tested by the doctor several times now. Chylomicrons are not in there. But in a chylomicron, we have some resources, and the cholesterol inside there, you can just see a few of those little yellow cholesterol molecules. Only 8% of this structure is cholesterol, but the phospholipids around the outside give you about 7%. So that is a chylomicron. We're going to look at the next one called very low density lipoprotein. So VLDL, and I'll just not, I'm going to dive into that just a little bit in a minute. Try just to remember it's the one that begins with a V. And you'll see that its triglycerides have dropped to 50. The cholesterol is a little more, you've got 22%, and then the phospholipids are at about 18%. We're going to show you why that happens in a minute. And then we're going to move on to the one that begins with an I, which stands for intermediate density lipoprotein. This one also, like the VLDL, has an ApoB100 tag on the outside. The triglycerides are only 30% by now. You can see a lot more of those cholesterol relative to the triglycerides. You've almost got 30% of those. And then the phospholipids now are about 22%. So the next one is, again, our LDL cholesterol. So that what was on our patient's, her panel, right? Her LDL cholesterol was, in the end, over 300. That's terrible. You got to get on a statin. This is awful. Your LDL cholesterol is so high. Or is it? So the triglycerides inside there, almost none. Your triglycerides are almost all gone, but the cholesterol is 50%. And then the phospholipids on the outside are still 20%. Now you can see that doesn't add up to 100% because there's other things going on, but those are the three particles we're really caring about. When it comes to HDL, HDL has this other tag on the outside. This is our healthy cholesterol. This little fella is also found on your cholesterol panel, and it hardly has any triglycerides, but it does have a lot of cholesterol, 30%, and then the phospholipids again, 30%. So it has a lot of similarities to the LDL cholesterol as far as percentages, but it's got a different flag on the outside. Okay, so you should be thoroughly confused by now, but we're going to save you. All right, this chart may look, you say I'm not supposed to get doctory, but I'm really trying to show you this is why we lose patients' attention span, because we are speaking something that I wish we could scrap this whole plan and talk a different language. But medicine is about the trials and studies, and there are so many studies looking at the different levels of proteins behind cholesterol that we're going to talk this language for another 100 years. I swear. I don't know how it's going to change. So I'm just going to show you the pictures. We've already gone through these: Chylomicron, VLDL, IDL, LDL, and HDL. And then I'm going to show you density. So this bothers me so much. So when you, oh, actually, it's going to go this way. I'll do density when we get done. So looking at chylomicrons, they are the fluffiest. They're the least dense. Their density is less than a gram per milliliter. So that's why when we looked at that test tube, 100 years ago in medicine, we could see those things float to the top. They've got lots of triglycerides in them. If you look at the chart over there, the triglycerides are 84%. When you look at the VLDL, that's a little heavier than the chylomicron, and its diameter is much smaller. Chylomicrons are big and fluffy. Like, I couldn't even make them as big proportionally because they wouldn't fit on the slide. But they are much smaller. VLDL is much smaller than your chylomicron. Remember that its lipoprotein has changed too. We're at ApoB100 now, and then the percentages have changed a little there. Your IDL gets a little heavier, and then those are the percentages. Your LDL gets even heavier. If you can see those ranges, the density is saying, okay, the chylomicrons are fluffy. And then we've got very low density lipoprotein, intermediately dense lipoproteins, low density lipoprotein, and then we've got high density lipoprotein. So what does high density mean? It means heavy. It's really dense. It's small and like a rock. But it has a different tag on it. So it doesn't even play this game. It does actually have a protective factor. We want that HDL to be high, but it's like a different molecule altogether. However, that VLDL, IDL, LDL, those turkeys are very similar. And we're going to show you why everybody gets so confused. All right, so this is an overview. We're going to talk about how the liver is where cholesterol leaves. It's where fat gets packaged. These molecules come out of the liver. They have certain tags on them, and they then give away a bunch of resources and come back to the liver. It's supposed to be a cycle. So we're going to go through that.
Please subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos. Stay tuned.